Back again with another episode, man, on Perfecting Progression. Episode 7, Season 2. Got a special guest. I'm definitely appreciative of having her on the platform. And back in my hometown, man, of Michigan. Got another Michigan native, more specifically Detroit native. But this podcast episode will be called Evolving Still with Eboni Sawyer. I'm going to let her introduce herself and then we can kind of kick things off.
Hi guys, my name is Eboni Sawyer. I am the owner of Evolve Still, the podcast, where I basically do something similar, which is have conversations about being better and just evolving. I spend a lot of time doing workshops and creating things like journals and things like that because I focus primarily on mental health.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, again, this is big. I mean, I know we are both still in our podcast journeys.
Yeah.
And I think you are in your, what season is it?
Technically 3.
3?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this is good. I mean, just kind of me being in my second season and being able to kind of bring this more to a visual representation. Definitely want to kind of collaborate with some of the people that I know that this will be good for, myself and then other platforms too as well. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I definitely appreciate you. But like I said in the beginning, as I was introducing, let's kind of hop into a little bit more so, I guess, deeper into your background. So again, I'm from Michigan, you're from Michigan, but kind of give us like a little bit of your background of, I guess, like more so of your upbringing, a little bit of like where you grew up at, your high school, a little bit of that, so we can kind of, have the audience learn more about you outside of Evolving Still.
Yeah, so I am a Detroit kid through and through.
Mm-hmm.
I went to all the Detroit schools. I went to
all
Bates.
The Detroit schools.
I went to Bates, starting off at Bates,
okay.
Right? The
Yep.
Bates to Cass pipeline is crazy.
Really?
Yeah,
because
so
I was with the Cougars, so we practiced.
at Bates. Yeah. So I literally went to Bates, then I went to Cass. So I was always in Detroit. I grew up, on 6 Mile Press.
Okay.
And then in middle school, I was in like the University District area, so 7 Mile, Illinois. But yeah, I spent like all my life in Detroit, and then when I went to college, I didn't go that far away. I only went 45 minutes. And yeah, I love Detroit. I'm super passionate about even staying here now on my medical school journey, which I'm sure we'll get into a little later. But yeah.
Okay. Well, good deal. And I think before we kind of hop into some of your schooling, more so, you like you said, there was a pipeline of a lot of people going to Bates and then going to Cass Tech. But kind of like, let's talk about a little bit more of the Detroit culture, because honestly, with my journey, again, I've been to a few different places: Michigan, Minnesota, Kentucky, Kansas. Like I've been a few different places, and being able to kind of be in these different environments and understand people's mentalities. Again, everybody's going to have a different mentality in different environments, but I do feel like specifically like Detroit mentality, Detroit culture is somewhat of a what do I want to say? It's somewhat of a positive to kind of have that ingrained in you, because it kind of helps you get through your journey, and I can get deeper into that, but I kind of want to talk about some of the things that kind of molded you with being in Detroit culture and kind of growing up, in that environment.
Yeah, so actually as a kid, I did gymnastics in like Novi. I went to Christian school before my Detroit journey started, right? They kind of shielded me as a child, like a little small child. So I was in a lot of white spaces. And then it wasn't until around middle school that I was like thrown into the city, right? But it was a stark difference, because I started like seeing people who like looked like me. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, I thought I was like a bigger kid. Mm-hmm. I was not. But
bigger as in
like big, just because I'm built bigger, right? So I have I've always had bigger thighs and like just in comparison to a small white children that I was around. And so I always was like, oh my God, like I'm bigger. I wasn't tall, but I just always felt like I was bigger than all the other kids. Right. But then once I got around people who kind of looked like me, it was like, actually I'm pretty little. This is weird, right? And so it changed my whole outlook. It changed how I thought about myself. Like I always thought like, I was a cute girl. I didn't have like self-esteem issues, but I did feel like I didn't fit in. And so when I got to Detroit, it was more like, oh, I fit into this culture. Yeah. And then I went to Bates, which is like supposed to be like a pretty good.
Wasn't it private?
No, it's not private, but it's like the only middle school that you have to test into. Yeah. So it's kind of like Cass in that sense. Yeah. And so it's a public school, but it's like a better education public school. And so I was around a whole bunch of kids who like were a little bit wilder than, of course, like the Christian school that I went to, but they were also still very good kids. And so I had this expectation of like really, succeeding. And I think like to speak to Detroit culture, it's like we have to succeed no matter what we have or we don't have. And so at Bates, it was like we had like resources and things like that. But at Cass, because it's such a larger school, we kind of went without a lot of times. And it was like, well, you still have to, get this stuff done, right? And so I think it really, really prepared me to not make excuses and kind of just make things out of nothing, right? Like think about homework and like we would have to take pictures. This sounds so bad. We had to take pictures of the textbook to do the homework because there was not enough textbooks for us to go home with. Yeah. And so like things like that, it really prepared me for college because it was like no matter what, I gotta figure it out. I'm still expected to succeed. I'm still expected to show up as like my best self with limited resources. And so I think it was very like it changed me as a person because it gave me this mindset of like I gotta go and get it, really. Yeah. But it also was like I had to kind of block out the noise, right? So I was at Cass when we were like the ghetto warriors or, whatever.
Ghetto warriors.
You're right. That's what they told us.
I'm like, what? I ain't never heard that.
No, because I think it was the year we won the championship.
And Which year was that? Was that your freshman? Sophomore?
It was the sophomore year, I think.
Okay.
And a popular predominantly white school, some grown adult wrote a letter to the football team and was like, you guys are like the ghetto warriors and all of this stuff. But like even stuff like that, it's like we are just kids trying to succeed rather the football team playing or the kids that just go there. It's like, why we gotta be ghetto warriors though, right? And so even just kind of like the doubt that other people have around us, we still have to show up and like be our best selves for it. And it's the same thing in college, right? Like if I go to a professor, they're like, maybe you need to change your path. It's like living with that doubt and kind of having to push through it and be like, just assured of yourself, I think is like the definition of Detroit culture, right? And I came back from college, Detroit was completely different. Downtown, like Cass had it was nothing down there when I was in school, and I'm like, what is this Q line? Like it just looked different, but it's people kind of buying into something that we always knew was special because we lived there. Yeah.
Well, thank you for kind of giving us that breakdown. I think it is important for people in my audience because again, like most of I have a balanced audience, so Detroit and also Minnesota as well. But specifically understanding like where I come from, like I hold that true to my heart just because again, like I've been in many different environments, but I always I feel like the root of it comes back from where I grew up at, kind of being in that environment just because it's motivating. So that's really what I wanted you to break down so the audience can see because at the end of the day, like you don't just come out and you're just epic. Like certain things that you go through is going to mold you, is going to help you excel, in comparison to other people because of your environment, the things that you went through. Some of that stuff can't just be coached. You got to go through it. You got to bump your head. So that was, that's one thing that I like to highlight when we talk about perfecting progression or evolving still. You still evolving. We all still perfecting our progression, so that was important. And then also, as we talk about Cass Tech, so yes, you are a Cass Tech alum. I was going to say because I want to talk about how prestigious Cass Tech is. I didn't want to put the quotations around it, but it is. Like me getting older, I can kind of see a lot of people.
Sorry.
You good?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I was just going to say, like, I see a lot of people outside of the people that was like within our year or me playing sports. Like, there's a lot of people that went to Cass Tech. Yeah. And even one of my friends that stays across from my grandparents, her grandmother was a teacher at Cass Tech for years.
Yeah.
So I just kind of wanted you to talk about your time of being a Cass Tech alum. And then I kind of seen, I want to say maybe on your last episode, how most people feel like Cass Tech is like second to none. Again, I mean, it's a big, when me playing football, when I would, because this is at the time with like Detroit popping right now for football. But like, maybe like because I graduated 2015, so when I got to Minnesota, usually, or if you get to any school, if they talking about Detroit, they really gonna talk about Cass Tech. That's the only thing they know. But now a lot of people, they know about Southfield, Detroit, King. It's a lot of things that they know about, but Cass Tech is still like that number one. So I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about your time at Cass Tech and like why is it deemed as so prestigious?
Yes. Okay. I will say this again on your platform. We get a bad rep, I promise.
I don't think it's a bad rep.
It is. Because anytime they be like, oh, you went to Cass. Because they say we just talk about it so much. And it's like, but people want to know, what is it like?
It's the arrogance.
Yeah.
It ain't even a bad, it's just the arrogance that come with it. It's like, we ain't really trying to hear that.
But I don't feel like I present that way. No, but I still, you just guilty by association. That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
But at Cass, I think the really cool thing about being at Cass and kind of having that, like you said, like prestige, is like, it's connections, it's networking, right? In life, you have to build a network. And if I go in any room in Detroit and I say, oh, I went to Cass, there's going to be people who like, okay, girl. But there's also going to be somebody who's like, oh, I went there, or I used to work there, my niece went there, right? So it's all about building connections and just kind of having that like family, unit, right? And so it's the same thing at Bates, and that's why I say the Bates to Cass pipeline is crazy, because a lot of people, when I went to Bates, like a lot of people who are lawyers or like doctors in the city, they send their kids to Bates. And so we would go to school with all these like kids, like not even knowing really who their parents are. And then when you get, even to this day, if I have an issue or if I, need a connection or something, I'm calling my Bates people. I'm calling Cass people. I'm like, hey, Miss Phillips is the principal of Cass. I have a great relationship with her. Even with Evolve and Still, when I like, oh, I want to do this, I want to bring this to the youth. Can you point me in the direction, right? It's all about relationship and having that kind of connection. They're always looking out for me. As long as you stay in touch with them and like they know who you are, they're going to look out. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, like, about being at Cass. Like, yeah, you're like most hated, but also within the community, you're like super loved. Same thing with Michigan. Michigan has like a large alumni, network. I can go across the world and have a block image on and somebody's gonna say go blue, and you're like, go blue, you know what I'm saying? So it's all about connection and networks. And even the programs that I was in that are from Detroit or started in Detroit, like Midnight Golf Program, all of that is networking. All of that is building relationships. And no matter where you go and what you like decide to accomplish in life, you can always find somebody who can help you get to your next goal by using that network.
I love that you're talking about this, just because like I can't harp on it enough, and it's I feel like it's easier said than done. I'm a natural person who loves to like build partnerships. I love to network. But again, like as we grow up, like it's kind of cliche to hear like it's not what you know, it's who you know. A lot of people hear that and be like, yes, like I understand that, but truly as you get older, you need to be intentionally making connections. Like it don't need, like, of course people are kind of, as an athlete, like make sure you kind of you're firm with your handshakes and make sure you're introducing yourself, but also you need to make sure that you're nurturing that too. Like that's the next step. Like, of course, okay, we just met Eboni, cool, but now it's like, who is Eboni? Like, what type of steps is she taking towards being in that space? So more so, I guess what I'm harping on, the relationship deal of what you talked about, like I resonate with that so much, is because I feel like that is who I am.
Yeah,
I have a great relationship focus around people that I connect with, and I can always lean back on those people that I made a connect, because I'm always leaving a lasting impression on them. So it's always good to do that. And so as we transition, I guess going into you discovering like your purpose, I feel like this is kind of in that area where you're talking about making sure that you're building relationships, making sure that you're intentional. So with you going through Bates, with you going to Cass Tech, when did you kind of discover some of the things that you want to do or that you were passionate about? Like, let's talk about a little bit of that, like where that started, where that sparked that.
Yeah. So I was very like I feel like I was good at a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
I got injured, couldn't do gymnastics anymore. So then I was just like, you know what, I'm chilling, right? I'm having fun. I was always smart, but I didn't have like something that I was super passionate about. I guess I was in so many organizations, so many clubs. Like I was always busy, always doing things, but it was not one field that I was like super, super like this is, this is gonna be the field. It wasn't until college where I was in undergrad, it was like my freshman year, and I kind of was just like, oh my God, like, you know how people say you peak in high school? I was so afraid of peaking in high school because I felt like high school was so fun. That's the other thing I think about cast. It's like, it's so fun. You have so many, just so many different type of people. We're all in the city, everybody at that time, we were like, again, champions, all this stuff. So it was like a lot of stuff.
That's a different way to look at it. I never looked at it like that, what you just brought up.
Yeah. Right. But we literally would have fun. We would have all the parties, all the things. Like, you can go anywhere, like almost the same thing of, I can go anywhere and have a block M1. You can go anywhere in the city, like, oh, I go to Cass. There's going to be somebody to, spark up a conversation. And so I was like, I do not want to, like, peak in high school. This can't be, where I do my best work. I'm the most social. I do, I'm in org.
It was a deep fear.
Yeah. So when I was in undergrad and not like my first year, I'm like, you know what? I need to really figure out like who I am, what I want to do. And I had no idea. I was in Midnight Golf, like I said, and a part of their like program is like announcing at the end what school you're gonna go to. Everybody was like, what school you gonna go to? Like, what do you want to study? And I was just like, I don't know. Because I just really was afraid to. It was the first time in my life where I had to make a decision for myself. Like, my parents weren't making the decision for me, right? And so I'm like, of course, 17, 18, I'm like, this is the end of the world. If I make the wrong decision right now, this is the end of the world, okay? Yeah. I'm done. Yeah. So I put a lot of pressure on it, and I went through like a lot of anxiety and just different things my senior year because I was really like just afraid that like this is my peak. And so throughout taking classes, of course, like I had to go to college. There wasn't an option for me. And so while I was there, I kind of spent time really just being alone. Right. And like people do not like being alone, but I would be alone every single day and be like, okay, what do I like? What do I not like? Like just trying to get to know myself a little bit better because I felt like that would help me, on the path. So I would take like personality quizzes and like career, all the things like which way should I go? And it was actually in my psychology class where they start talking about stuff that I didn't know. But it was stuff that I was familiar with. Going back to growing up in the city, like being exposed to like people having mental breaks and things like that, but not having the language. Like you go to a gas station and somebody's like talking to their stuff, you're like, oh, they're crazy. And that's just normal for us. You know what I'm saying? Especially as a young girl in the city. It's like, oh, they crazy. Just stay away from them. But going to psychology class and they were like putting names behind these things. Like, oh, this is bipolar, this is this. And I'm like, it just really hit me out of nowhere, honestly. I think that I just took time to do the work and to kind of be sensitive and listen to my environment. And then once I was in that environment, I was like, you know what? Like, I want to learn more about this. So then I became obsessed with the brain. Yeah. And it's very weird for a lot of medical students or people who want to be doctors. They want to be doctors their whole life. That was never my ministry. It wasn't until I really start learning about the brain and how it works. I'm like, this is where I'm supposed to be, right? And so talking about purpose, it's about where you're supposed to be. So my career field, right, it kind of mapped itself out to me. But in the meantime, because it's such a long journey, it's like, how can I work in my purpose now, right? And so things like mental health and stuff like that, that's stuff I can share now without the degree, without going through all the things. And so I really just leaned into that, start talking about it more. And I realized that it was a big need in the community, right? Because it wasn't just me who didn't know this stuff, it was other people. And so after that, I just kind of continued to do all the things that I used to do, but I had a different perspective and it was more purpose driven, right? So I was still in a lot of orgs, I was still kind of all over the place, but I had like this purpose of spreading information everywhere I went. And like I think that was the way that I figured out what my purpose is. And over time it kind of just started aligning. And it's like, wow, this has been it the whole time. I didn't have the perspective to see it.
Yep. And I think, as we kind of like transition, I think again, like that is important to kind of figure out. Everybody is always trying to figure out their purpose, and then also as you grow, your purpose sometimes will become different. Your purpose is not going to be what it was once in high school, in college, or as you kind of as you become a young adult. But at the same time, it's still going to be somewhat in that same space. It's just more so elevated to like helping you see a clearer picture, or making you see a clearer vision of some of the things that you want to excel in, and want to achieve, specifically. Um, so kind of talking a little bit about the things that you went through, with, kind of being in your undergrad years, and some of the crucial findings that you kind of came across, which was self-awareness and mental health.
Yeah.
Now that we kind of go into like being resilient and then also being persistent, like when we talk about like unwavering commitment, like what were some of the challenges and setbacks, I guess, during this period? Of course, like what you just talked about were to a degree were challenges, but I feel like now I kind of want you to talk more about it, because as we're talking to the audience and as they're listening, they're like these are still things that people have a tough time to get through, and sometimes they don't see it through.
Yeah.
So I wanted you to kind of talk about, as we're on the topic of mental health, and being self-aware. Sometimes people kind of check out, and it's not as what I want to say. It's not as easy for them to get through tough obstacles. Like I'm more so a person of like, this is in front of me. I know this got to get done. We just gonna take it day by day. We gonna get through it. Some people are just like how you were talking about. You was kind of like freaking out to an extent of like, man, I don't know what's next. I don't know where I'm going, and kind of just like taking a step back. Like you didn't do that, but some people will take a step back and just be like, man, I don't know how this is gonna work out. But some people, me specifically, and other people, it's like just take it one day at a time, and things will work itself out. So I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about challenges and setbacks, and then also, I guess what I had, kind of what I had written down a little bit is that within challenges and setbacks, usually this is driven by purpose, and the ability to overcome obstacles.
Yeah.
So when you go through these obstacles, you eventually kind of figure out like, damn, like I got through this shit. So it was like, this kind of helps you form, your purpose specifically. So I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. So.
I think the first challenge was what I described, right? And then after that, my perspective change kind of helped me go through this path, right? And just because you like the brain doesn't mean you have to be a doctor. There's very specific things that have gone on in the journey to force me that way. Mm-hmm. But what I think the biggest thing for me was I have a relationship with God, right? And so having that belief in that relationship with God is God will present things to me that's like only he could do this, right? And so it was my first year at Michigan. I was at a research thing. So I knew I wanted to do something in the sciences. And I walked into the office. I was doing research for a surgeon. And I walked in and I seen like all the doctors' white coats along the line because I was in their private library. And it was literally, it's something that I almost can't describe because it was literally a moment like, no, you're supposed to be here. Like, I don't know how you're going to get here, but you're supposed to be here. It's a feeling that I can't replicate. I've never felt it again, but I remember it vividly to this day. And so from that, right, that doesn't mean that the journey isn't hard. That doesn't mean that you have any sort of plan about how to get there. And so I had to figure it out. There's no one in my family that's a doctor. There's no one, my mama don't got no friends that's doctors. You know what I'm saying? There's no family friends that have this pathway. And that was a big challenge at Michigan because I'm there with a lot of people who grew up in families. Their whole families are doctors, right? That's like one of the saddest things about the white coat ceremony as a medical student is that there's so many different people who their families are putting their coats on, right? You have to be coated by a doctor, and it's like their dad's putting their coat on. That's not, and then you see like all these black people, and they're like, this is their mentor, you know, whatever. It's a very clear difference. And of course, there's some people who have that opportunity and that privilege. Their dads are doctors and they're black or whatever. But that just wasn't the case for me. So I had to figure out, okay, what does this plan look like? And that included like going and having someone tell me what it looks like from A to B, right? And sometimes it doesn't go that way for you, right? So at Michigan is very difficult. They make things difficult for fun, I think.
To make you better, though.
I mean, yes, because they wanna say that they're the best, right? Mm-hmm. So they're gonna make it a little bit more challenging, but it's like sometimes you can relax a little. But yeah, they make it very difficult. And so I struggled. Like I was never interested in science and I had to learn how to learn sciences. Yeah. Like, and there was no class that's going to teach me how to learn science. Yeah. All of those things. And what I went back to every time was this feeling that if I don't get through this, I'm going to spend the rest of my life unfulfilled because I felt beforehand like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I had all this anxiety and I was just like lost. And I'm like, I never want to feel like that again. And so once I got the purpose or I got the vision or where I'm supposed to go, yep. It's like I have to do every single thing that I can to never feel like that, yep. No matter what. And sometimes you try things that don't work out. You know, there's ups and downs every day, but you have to get back up. And something that I always tell like students and just people who ask me questions in general, like people do things they do not want to do every single day. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to do stuff that you don't want to do. Sometimes you got to do stuff that hurt, that stress you out. Like that's just a part of the journey. But is the reward going to be better than the pain? Is it going to... Are you willing to be miserable for the rest of your life or just go through this discomfort now to get to your goal? And I think that's the thing that I keep in mind that keeps me like going. Yep.
Like I'm loving the flow of the conversation because that's exactly where I was going to take it more specifically about short-term discomfort versus long-term rewards, you know, and I wanted to weigh in on that importance and you did that. Like that's exactly what I want, you know, different audiences to see. Because again, I mean, if we, of course, like me and you, I can see like as you're talking, like this resonates with me because I know exactly like you have to put the work in, but it's not going to happen overnight. Yeah. So sometimes it's good for other people to hear that because it might change somebody else's life while they're in their purpose or trying to figure out their purpose. So I'm glad that you talked about that. And then also, you also talked about embracing the hard work, like embracing the hard work as a non-traditional pre-med student. Like that is kind of big for me to kind of learn more so about. There is going to be certain spaces. Essentially, there's going to be certain spaces that's just not made for you, but that don't mean you can't go get it. So like, just because it's not deemed as made for you, like, yes, you're going to see a lot of things that's just not traditional within the Black community. Yeah. You know, so you're going to see a lot of white families that are just like, this is us, this is what we do, boom, boom, bam. But at the same time, like, I do think what you're doing right now is you're creating a path, you know, that you can speak towards and that you can go back to different academies or different areas and say, like, this is how you do this shit. Like, I'm going to walk you through it because we don't have enough. That's one thing that I'm learning as I continue to grow. Just having people that look like us in leadership roles. Yeah. You know, me growing up, I wanted to play ball. I mean, my person that I looked up to was my dad. He played ball, but a lot of us going to school in that community of playing PAL, going against guys at CASEC, whatever, like that's our community because we looking at each other. We're going to make each other better. Yeah. We're going to get to the next level. Yeah. And that's how that goes. So Now it's more so about, which is what made me kind of develop my platform, is that it's so much of a big area with athletes that graduate. We go to college, they might make it to the league, play in the league for about 2 3 years or whatever, and now it's like, okay, like what's the plan B? How do I? Because again, like my plan B, or my plan, of course, is to make it to the league, but more so like if I am gonna have a profession, I'm thinking like it's gonna be something associated with sports.
Yeah.
But I got my degree in in communications and minored in business management, but I'm like, I don't know what this degree would go towards as far as like a profession.
Yeah.
So just understanding that, knowing that you have resources, or like a career, what I want to say, a career services center at your universities, people that you can reach out to, knowing that you have specific resources to do, when it's people in leadership roles and looking up to, is very important, because sometimes, again, some people don't get on that curve until later on down in their young adult age, which is not bad. It's just more so you got other people from different communities that's hopping right on it.
Right.
That's the difference. So that's a little bit about, somewhat of what kind of got me sparked with the platform of Perfect and Progress. But now, as we talk about embracing hard work, you already talked about some of the things going through being a non-traditional pre-med student, but also I wanted to talk a little bit about pursuing like business opportunities. So eventually, yes, we're going to get right into like your brand evolving still, but like, how did that look also within I guess, because we talked a little bit about it too, you being at the Jalen Rose Academy.
Yeah.
But like, let's talk about just how does pursuing business opportunities look. I really do think it starts with being intentional and making relationships.
Yeah.
That's really where it starts. That's probably the root, but I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about it too.
Yeah. I think with building relationships, right? So we can look at it from an evolving still perspective. We can look at it from a medical student perspective. With no matter what, you always have to build relationship and leverage your relationships, right? Yeah. Because even in medical school, right, when you're applying, they say, oh, you can have, the best grades, you can have the highest scores, but you have to have something else. You have to have something that's like you said, leaves a lasting impression. What extracurriculars are you in? Like, how are they going to remember you? Because you can't just say, oh, I'm a great student, and they're going to let you in. There's thousands and thousands of applicants every time. Mm-hmm. Same with sports, right? There's thousands and thousands of great athletes. There's thousands of athletes who have a story and they trying to get it out the mud and they trying to move their family out the, that's just life, know? Right. And so what makes you different? What's going to push you over? And so I think for me, it's relationships, like you said, and just really using them, because you were talking about earlier how you kind of feel like you're naturally good at building relationships. There's some people who are not, right? That goes back to doing stuff you don't want to do. But there's some people that it's a skill that they have to practice, but it's going to get you to the next level. It's going to continue to make you even think about opportunities that you didn't think you could have, right? And just always being open to it, right? I'll talk about pivoting a lot. And sometimes you have to pivot, and sometimes you have to be open to new ideas. So when you're building relationships, if someone says, oh, hey, have you ever thought about, working here? Or have you ever thought about talking to this person? Same thing in the medical field. I tell students all the time, they say, how do you know what kind of doctor you want to be? I'm like, you really don't know until you do it, right? Which you don't go and try all these different specialties until your third and your fourth year of medical school. So how do you kind of gauge that before that time, right? I tell students all the time, find a doctor and say, hey, I'm a student. Can I can I shadow you? Sure. Can I come see what you do? Even if it's a field that you don't want to go into, because you're going to be able to learn and take something from it anyway. Right? There's a lot of times you can say, oh, I absolutely don't want to do this. And I know I don't because of this thing. Yep. And I want to do this. I'm looking, it kind of helps you tailor things. So don't always just look for things that you want to do, but explore some things that you don't want to do, right? And use your relationships to go get those opportunities. I had someone ask me last week, how do you do workshops and speaking engagements? I'm like, well, mostly I use my resources, right? I use the people that I know and I say, hey, do I start that conversation there. And even if they aren't, in a space to have a workshop or whatever, they can point me in the direction of someone who can. So again, just keeping an open mind. Don't feel like you have the answer, I think is the biggest thing. Because before, when I started Evolving Still, I wasn't even thinking about doing workshops, right? That wasn't on my radar at all. I'm like, I want to create this journal. This is what I want to do. And then it's like, okay, well, how can I sell journals on a larger scale, right, without going person to person? Workshops, is everybody who comes to the workshop gets a journal. It's a very easy way to scale, right? And I'm giving valuable information and all this stuff, but that wasn't my original plan. And if I didn't listen to someone who had that advice, like, you should think about teaching, you should think about this, I wouldn't even be in this space now.
You dropping downs right now. Definitely dropping downs. And I guess more so, what I was gonna talk about, or what you were talking about specifically, is kind of where I was gonna go to next. But I wanted to harp a little bit on you. Oh man, it was pretty much being the jack of all trades. So with you being a jack of all trades, you have to go into spaces, like you said, you're gonna go into spaces knowing that this is not your strength. And some people don't want to go that route, which is okay. But if I could, even with me coaching to you, like, it's okay that that your breaks ain't looking good right now, or that your whatever it is that we want to work on specifically as your position, it's not looking good right now. But again, like, you have to go into this space and begin to evolve.
Yeah.
You have to evolve. You gotta do the repetition. So you going into these spaces, learning from other people, it expanded your mind.
Yeah.
It expanded your mind. It expanded your skill set of you doing what you wanted to do to reach out to a broader audience, specifically. So that was, that was definitely some stuff that I think that was great to hear, and definitely great for the audience to hear. And then also, and again, that's kind of where I want to go to with talking about you being in the space of, I don't know if you consider yourself a jack of all trades. I can't remember, but being a jack of all trades is something that I try to achieve.
Yeah.
I really do try to achieve being a jack of all trades. I know I'm not good at everything, but I think within being a jack of all trades, it's gonna be, that's what it is. I wanted you to more so talk a little bit about balancing multiple pursuits. That's what it was. So being in that space of like, okay, like, this is what I want to attain. I wanted you to talk a little bit more about, your, as you kind of seeing your purpose kind of come to fruition, like, how does that balance look? How do you do that? And then, because I know you talked a little bit about anxiety and things of that nature, but like, how does that look for Eboni? I wanted you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that I have multiple interests. There's lots of things that I'm interested in, and I am very intentional on not letting one thing be my only thing. Because that's just not who I am as a person. I can't only be a doctor. That's not a personality trait. People think it is sometimes, which I think is a character flaw, but that is not my thing, right? So I feel like, for me, I just have to stay true to who I am, right? I've always been good at talking with people and connecting and teaching. People tell me all the time, like, oh my God, you explain things really well. It's just a natural skill set that I have, right? Mental health, Evolving Still came out of an accident. It was just something that I was doing for myself. It was just something that I'm taking care of my mental health in undergrad because I knew that this was a problem that I had. And then people are like, oh my God, show me how to do this. How do you do that? Right? Here comes the business. So sometimes it's not even intentional, but it's just, again, being open to exploring and using your strengths, right? These are things that I'm good at naturally. And so I'm going to continue to pursue those, continue to get better at them, right? Because there's no point of having all these like skill sets and not practicing them, because that doesn't work, right? And so being a jack of all trades for me looks like just being who I am authentically. I'm not going to pursue something that I don't have a natural interest in just for the sake of saying, oh, I can do everything. Exactly. Like, I don't want to do that, right? But the things that I'm okay and I'm good at, having conversations with people. I love having conversations with people. This is like a super fun thing for me to do. So yeah, I will pursue that, but I'm not going to sit there and be a blogger and force myself to write because that's what people think I should do. Right. And so I think for me, it's like, as long as it's something that I have an interest in, I'll pursue it. And then you also have to have balance and be able to prioritize certain things, right? So at some points in life, Evolving still has to take a back seat because medical school is very loud right now, right? At some point, medical school has to take a back seat because my family life, my personal life is very loud right now. So I have to also, every day, I have to wake up and say, what's the priority today, right? And sometimes the priority change every 10 minutes. And that's just what it is, right? But being organized and kind of making sure that you are clear in your priorities, I think is the biggest thing for me. Right. Because I don't want to be in a space and show up and say, I'm here for Evolve and Still, but I'm sitting here like trying to do homework, right? I'm not bringing my best self to right now. And so being present, I think, is a secret, I guess, for being a jack of all trades. So I think, to summarize, just doing things that you are actually naturally enjoy doing, not forcing it, and then also being present in whatever it is that you're prioritizing now are the two things that kind of helps and makes me a jack of all trades.
For sure. And I appreciate you breaking that down. It was, again, like, I feel like more so to encapsulate everything is, organization is important, prioritization is important, and thoughtful decision making is really important. And you talking about what you just said, I feel like it's being aware of what you need to be balanced in. That's really, it's the awareness piece. You can attain and you can achieve so many pursuits, but long as you can have somewhat of a thought process behind saying that you have to have a equal balance for everything. When it's a certain time to kick in the gear for Evolving Still, then it's a certain gear that you got to kick in for, being in school, So I think that was important for people to hear too. And then also, I had a point, I can't remember right now, but talking about Evolving Still, let's talk a little bit about that. I know I kind of seen some things about you being a self-care queen. I guess that kind of came about from your friends giving you that, or maybe you yourself kind of looked at looked at yourself as that. But kind of talking about the platform focal point. So advocating for emotional wellness, but also within that, I guess that kind of started from just how you take care of yourself and where that kind of, I guess, where it kind of rooted from. But I wanted you to talk a little bit about that nickname a little bit. Yeah. And then kind of going forward, talking a little bit about Evolving Stills, the focal point of, what the organization and what the brand is. Before you go, Evan, I'm sorry, I remembered it. So pretty much you talked about, that's all I want to hit on, I'm sorry. Being true to yourself. Yes. That's what I want to get to people. Being true to yourself is super, super important because that is what makes the brand. You don't even know that's your brand, but if you're being true to yourself and you not trying to, that's what it was. You were saying not trying to force stuff. I am a person who does not force energy. Like, the energy has to be right. And I seen you talk about that too on some of your episodes, but the energy is so important. Like, sometimes you go to certain people because they got a certain energy and you know that they're going to give it to you. But at the same time, just being true to yourself, like, it's already going to be an aura around Eboni because she has a certain energy. Dior has a certain energy. Whoever you connect with, like, your friend group has a certain energy. Yeah. I know not to bring this person around my friend group because they got a certain energy. Keep them away. Just keep them away. So, like, at the end of the day, I like what you said about being true to yourself, because again, being true to yourself helps you identify that vision in your brand. So I'm sorry, I had to go back to that. I was trying to find it, and I couldn't find it. But yes, talking about Evolving Still, wanted to just talk a little bit about you being a self-care queen, and then the platform focal point.
Yes, so a self-care queen is a name that other people gave me. I'm not that vain. But like I say, Evolving Still did come about from things that I was just naturally doing for myself. Yeah. And people are like, oh my God, like you always are going to prioritize yourself. And it also speaks to like my boundaries. I think I'm very self-aware. And I think you were kind of getting at that earlier. I'm very self-aware. I know like when I need certain things, right? Like this is the time that I can really tap in, I can grind. This is the time that I got to take a break. And I really stay in tune with where I am and what I need. And so for in college, I was like, you know, college is such a like loud, jealous thing, right? Like it takes up all your time. And of course I was social, again, all the orgs. But I was like, what can I do for myself that's not going to take long, but like just for me? And I'm such a advocate for that. I think that every day, no matter what, you should do one thing for yourself. Whether that's going to get some ice cream. Okay, these are my favorite things to do, but going to get ice cream, to watching your favorite show, taking 30 minutes and just sitting there listening to your favorite music. Like every single day, you have to do something for you because there's no way for you to show up for other people. And it's almost like a performance, right? But you want to keep it authentic. I would have to force it. If I don't feed into me and I'm trying to feed you, I'm going to have to force it. I'm going to have to force that energy. I'm going to have to fake it. But if I'm pouring into myself, I can naturally show up how I am, right? And so for me, it's like that's the whole, it's selfishness to get to selflessness. I have to be selfish to be able to become selfless outside. And so I think that's what the idea of how I was living my life came. And people just was like, you are like a self-care queen. You know all the things. You're going to take care of yourself no matter what. I'll have an exam, like, I'm going to bed. I can't do it, right? But making those sacrifices because I have to be able to show up, right? I cannot drop the ball. I cannot neglect myself. And then I'm going to end up disappointing more people by doing that. And so that's how the self-care queen thing came about. And then Evolving Still, the whole focus is to create conversations about mental health and not talk about it in a way of like just disorders, right? Not just talking about anxiety, not just talking about depression, but like every single day. And then it kind of, again, one of those like God things, it all comes together because I'm studying to be a doctor, right? So I always talk about physical health, how important your physical health is, right? But also with that, I'm the person that's going to say your mental health is just as important as your physical health, right? Because you can have a physical ailment and you're not going to be able to show up. That's the exact same thing. If you are mentally not there, you may show up physically, but you're not showing up as your best self. And so that's the main goal of Evolving Still. And so I try to create like calendars and journals and things like that take a little bit of time. It doesn't take so much time away from you. You can't say, oh, I'm so busy, I can't do it, right? Just little things that forces you to spend time with yourself and be more introspective. And then, so that's like the product side of Evolving Still. And then we have the podcast, which again, is literally just creating conversations, trying to get people to think about these things, right? How does this fit into your everyday life? So I've had episodes about literally like your hair, right? That's not something that most people think about. But your hair, how you look is how you feel. That's important. That goes into your mental health. So having conversations like that, getting people to think outside of the box is another thing that is like a pillar for Evolving Still. And then the last thing is workshops, which is just me being able to connect with the audience one-on-one, being able to ask and answer questions, being able to tell them what worked for me, what is scientifically proven, because I use my background, right, my science background, to basically convince the audience of the things that I'm saying, right? I'm not trying to just show up and just say, oh, this is how it made me feel. But like, let's look at the science behind it. Let's look at the research and being able to connect and talk to people in person, right? Let them ask me questions. Let them kind of pick my brain. And that's probably my favorite part of Evolving Still is the workshops. But that's like the last pillar of Evolving Still and what we are like supposed to encompass. But the whole thing is that it's just a brand that's reminding you that you always, no matter what, no matter where you are, you always have the power to literally just get better and evolve.
And so, I mean, you just you really wrapped it up. That was great that you did that because again, I'm learning so much from you. Me being in this podcast space and me being on my journey, I think it's definitely giving me, is giving me a space to learn from you about like some of the services that you offer and the workshops that you offer within your brand of Evolving Still. So I think that is definitely helpful for not just myself as a business owner, but other people too that's watching this as well. I feel like you could definitely learn a lot from what Ebony has been talking about on this whole episode. So again, one, I do appreciate you again for being on the platform. I do think this is going to be an impactful episode. People can kind of tap into. I'm back in my hometown, Michigan, so a lot of people will definitely tap in from both markets, Michigan and Minnesota, with me being out there. So again, make sure you guys tap in with Ebony on Evolving Still. We'll make sure you guys can follow her on Instagram. Any other social handles I should be talking about, or you can be talking about?
No, I just think Instagram is evolving.still. TikTok is also evolving.still. We do fun little cute things over there. But those are the main things. And then of course Evolving Still, the podcast is available on all streaming sites.
For sure. Well, again, thank you for being on the platform.
Thank you for having me.
Make sure y'all be sure to tap into the YouTube channel, subscribe to both Evolving Still and Perfecting Progression. Make sure y'all do that. Definitely making some impact here in the communities. And yeah, man, appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all tap in.